Hey guys, and welcome. We've got more motorcycle history for you today, and this time we're looking at 10 bikes that have seen military use. Okay, now most of us getting on our motorcycles, what are we doing? Commuting to work or going for a bimble? Or even having a nice fast blat around somewhere scenic. Rarely could it have entered your mind that motorcycles are perfectly adept at escorting convoys, delivering messages over adverse terrain, or even being a weapons platform. Now what we're going to do is look at 10 such bikes that either were made specifically for one of those roles or had a road-going version that was converted for military use. To start, we have a couple of the more bizarre examples. Vespa 150 TAP. Now you might have seen photos of this machine used in memes across social media and thought that it had to have been a bizarre custom build or a photoshopped image, but the Vespa 150 TAP is a very real anti-tank scooter. It was introduced in 1956 by ACMA, the licensed assemblers of Vespas in France, for use by French paratroopers. Designed to be parachuted into the action fully assembled on a pallet, the 150 TAP offered an upgraded 150cc two-stroke engine and reinforced frame over its standard model. Oh, and a ruddy great bazooka sticking out of its leg shield. An M20 75mm recoilless rifle, to be more precise. Though mostly meant to be used with the M1917 Browning machine gun tripod, legend has it that in a pinch, you could, with a little contortion, use it whilst the Vespa was in motion. Though, we're not sure if the enemy would be worse off, or you. From light and nimble to something that weighs more than 4 Africa twins, the motorcycle tank hybrid that is the NSU Kettenkrad. This entry is a bit of a cheat, as this machine is technically a small tracked vehicle with a pilot wheel which it can actually be operated without. Powered by an Opel Olympia Model 38 engine producing 37 brake horsepower. Steering is achieved, as you might expect, by turning the bars left or right, though sharp turns would engage the tracks, allowing the Kettenkrad to turn on a dime if need be. The Kettenkrad mostly saw action on the Eastern Front during World War II, where they were used to lay communication cables and ferry soldiers and heavy loads across Russia's adverse landscape. Production continued after the war, where Kettenkrads unsurprisingly found use as agricultural vehicles. And if the Kettenkrad looked every inch the war machine, then the CZ175 is its diametric opposite. Svelte and minimalist, the CZ175 was lightweight and handled well, but a hard-tailed, underpowered motorcycle was never going to be a winner on the battlefield. You have to admit, it was a good-looking bike though. Sadly, there doesn't seem to be a lot of info out there about these Czech machines, so if you have some information, please drop it in the comments below. When we say this next bike is something straight out of a James Bond movie, I want you to think less of Daniel Craig on a Triumph and more of Sean Connery on a Honda ATC. The Excelsior Welbike did actually have its origins with Britain's Secret Service. The original idea coming from Lieutenant Colonel John Dolphin, who was commanding officer of the Top Secret Special Operations Executive. They operated out of Station 9, which was a factory in Welland, tasked with making special weapons and equipment for World War II. Now, being based in Welland, All of their projects began with the prefix Well, hence the Welbike. They also developed the Wellman, a small single-person submarine, and the Wellrod, a silenced pistol. The Welbike was designed to be dropped in a capsule container alongside paratroopers. The troops would then locate the capsule and with minimal setup be up and on their way. It was powered by a two-stroke engine and had a 3.7-litre tank with a range of 90 miles. Although it has a bit of a cult following and would go on to inspire the likes of Honda's Monkey Bike, the Welbike's contribution during World War II was negligible. The weight difference between the troops and the capsule containing the bikes often led to them landing some distance apart, somewhat defeating the purpose. By the time they entered mass production, larger gliders had been designed for dropping troops and equipment, such as the much more robust Royal Enfield WD RE. This one makes the list for the story alone. How did UK legislation lead to the Japanese riding Harley-Davidsons into battle in World War II? Well, back in 1921, the UK passed the Safeguarding of Industries Act. This placed duties of 33.3% on many imported items, including motorcycles. This led to Harley-Davidson losing out in many Commonwealth countries, so to try and pull back those losses, they looked to the east, setting up the Harley-Davidson Motorcycle Sale Company of Japan in 1924. With an ever-changing political climate and the onset of the Great Depression, it soon became apparent that the best way to move forward would be to have Harley-Davidson built in Japan under license and solely for the Japanese market. Sankyo were the company granted that license, producing the Harley-Davidson Rikuo or Road King. They would have a falling out with Harley-Davidson in 1936, but continued to manufacture bikes, now simply under the Rikuo name. The Japanese military also encouraged other factories to produce knockoff Harleys, with almost all their output heading to the army. Things, however, would go from bad to worse. In 1937, with Japan's invasion of China escalating, Americans Harley-Davidson had on the ground were advised to leave. Other American companies in Japan found themselves in the same boat, with their factories effectively being nationalized as Japan grew increasingly militaristic. And the rest, as they say, is history. The 1200cc Type 97 was mostly used in Japan's battles against China, so we're not sure if it would have ever come face to face with one of its American cousins on the battlefield. But you never know. The War Department Royal Enfield, better known as the Flying Flea, was designed to be a lightweight motorcycle that could be dropped alongside paratroopers to aid in establishing lines of communication along the battlefront. The original road bike the Flying Flea is derived from was actually a copy of the German DKW RT100. Germany's largest motorcycle manufacturer at the time, DKW, produced the light and nimble RT100, which was imported into the Netherlands by R.S. Stokvis and Sons, a Jewish-owned company. With the rise of the Nazis, this soon came to an end, so in 1938, looking to fill the void, R.S. Stokvis turned to Royal Enfield, who copied the frame and forks of the popular RT100 but added a 125 engine. So, when the War Department came calling in 1942 looking for a lightweight motorcycle for paratroopers, Royal Enfield had just the thing. The Flying Flea was powered by a 125cc two-stroke engine and weighed in at 59 kilos. It could easily be manoeuvred around or through any obstacle in your way. A special casing was also developed to protect the bikes during drops, though only a handful were actually deployed this way, as it was later decided to load them into troop-carrying gliders 4 at a time. They were also deployed on several beach landings during 1943 and 1944. In February this year, Ica Motors, the parent company of Royal Enfield, applied to trademark the name Royal Enfield Flying Flea, sparking rumours that we may see some new small capacity machines from them sometime in the future. Harley Davidson, a long history in providing motorcycles for the US military, over 100 years. But surely their most iconic must be the WLA. The WLA started production in 1940 as part of a general US military expansion. Once the United States entered into World War II, production was vastly stepped up, with over 90,000 being made over the course of the war. 30,000 of those were bought by the Soviet Union. Weighing over 500 pounds and powered by a flathead side valve engine, the WLA was a robust and simple machine, easy to maintain with little knowledge and basic tools, and despite this, it was still one of the faster military motorcycles at the time. Because of said speed, the WLA was often used for escort work, courier duties, and some scouting. And although it was often seen with its holster complete with Thompson's submachine gun, the WLA was rarely deployed as a combat vehicle. It still, however, managed to garner the nickname Liberator, as it would often be seen roaring through towns and cities freshly cleansed of Nazis by US forces. The Harley-Davidson WLA would also go on to play a part in the custom chopper scene and the biker scene in general, as after the war many were civilianized and sold off cheaply. Whereas most of the bikes we've shown you have their origins in standard road-going versions, the Rokon Trailbreaker was built from the ground up to tackle anything you could throw at it. And that makes it perfect for military use straight out of the box. That ability comes at the price of its styling. Largely unchanged for over 60 years, there's no way this one is going to grow out of its ugly duckling looks. Its features included having a full-time two-wheel drive driven by a 208cc engine, hollow wheels that can help it float or can be filled with up to 2.5 gallons of water or fuel. It's also able to pull 2,000 pounds and navigate 60-degree grades, so no wonder it's the go-to vehicle for US and Jordanian special forces. All that fun isn't exclusive to the military either, as Rokon offer the Trailbreaker along with a variety of accessories and add-ons to the general public as well. It's also a firm favourite with doomsday preppers, which we would normally make fun of, but the way this year has been, maybe they're onto something. The BMW R71, the bike that spawned 1,000 copies. The R71 was the jewel in BMW's crown leading up to the Second World War and outperformed many of the Allied machines it came up against when its purpose was switched to more nefarious uses. Its shaft drive excelled in adverse conditions, and this fact didn't escape the Allies, who tasked Indian and Harley-Davidson with producing shaft-driven models. In the long term, however, these lost out to the WLA and Jeep. The R71 also caught the eye of the Soviets. Famously, they managed to get their hands on 5 R71s, with them being purchased by Swedish intermediaries. Once in the Soviet Union, they were dismantled and meticulously reverse-engineered, and by 1941, Stalin gave the go-ahead for mass production of the M72. The R75 was designed specifically for the war and sported the 750cc overhead valve engine that would be the basis of many post-war machines. used mostly during the invasion of Russia and across sandy deserts and dusty roads as fighting spread to North Africa. Despite its improvements over the R71, the R75 was seen as being inferior to the Zundap KS750, which we may talk about in a future episode. The BSA M20, my goodness, what a rags to riches tale. Initially rejected as a military motorcycle, it would go on to be the longest serving, the most mass-produced British military motorcycle. Being the largest motorcycle manufacturers in Britain at the time and having a long history of supplying arms, BSA were a natural fit to supply a motorcycle for the war effort. It didn't start off well, however. Back in 1936, its first submission of the M20 failed due to it suffering from severe engine wear, requiring a replacement piston and cylinder after only 6,000 miles. A year later, 3 more were submitted for testing. 2 of those only just scraping through the 10,000 miles suitability test, with the 3rd being used in service trials. A small batch was ordered in 1938, and despite a few niggles, they were praised for their reliability and ease of maintenance. With demand for a vehicle of this type growing every day, BSA got the nod and large orders were placed. So integral were BSA to Britain's war effort with their manufacture of armaments and motorcycles that their factories were often the target of Luftwaffe bombing raids. This led to one M20 factory being bombed on November 19, 1940. So fierce was the fire that firefighters drained the Birmingham and Warwick Canal trying to douse it. 53 workers were killed, with nearly 100 more injured. Work producing the M20 would continue on, however, and by the end of the war, over 126,000 were made. Despite those uneasy beginnings, the M20 would see action in almost every theatre of war, and would continue to have military use of one kind or another up to the late 60s. Right then, in no particular order, a top 10 list of bikes with military history. Now obviously we didn't cover every motorcycle that's been involved in the military or one way or the other, and who knows, we might even do another list later. If you have a particular bike you think we ought to cover, please let us know in the comments box. And also, if you like what we do and you'd like to help support us and have a say in what we do next, check out our Patreon page, where you will also have access to some bonus footage. Right then, you've been told, on your bike,